the Lightfoot Trail here, just north of Kucing Beach Park in Jarvis Street. We're just up by Borland Street, and this runs north, of course, out to the Utah Trail. Um, but the interesting thing is here, we're right at the junction of Collins Street. Collins here behind me, that's a dead-end street, and what happened was that back in 2010, the Orillia Power wanted to keep this old line coming in from the Swift generating station open. But what they were going to do is take this big line with the big poles here, run it up Collins Street so they could get their trucks in, easy maintenance, and just let this area along the trail go into natural regeneration, because we had a canopy of trees growing. It was a wonderful area. 2010 we got a new mayor and council. 2011 the new mayor and a Ward 4 councillor was contacted by a resident on Collins Street who didn't want the big poles and the guy wire there. So he's saying, let's cut and maintain that right away along the trail. A big argument. Unfortunately, it was a lose-lose for everybody, because what happened was they finally did decide to keep this and they cut it out. But they still got the big poles on Cowan and the guy wires, so no one was really happy. Far bigger than they needed to be. Had they ran the main 44 line up there, we could have saved this area. But by doing that, they opened up this whole area, and as you can see, this is garlic mustard, one of the invasive species. This is the rosette, the first year rosette, and then it gets a bigger seed head on the second year. This is all now dog strangling vine and garlic mustard and many other Japanese knotweed, many other invasives. By cutting this beautiful canopy out, they open it up for invasive species. But worst of all, we had some butternut. Now, the butternut is the only endangered tree we have in Ontario. It's really important to understand that butternut are declining so quickly. About 20 years ago, butternut canker come in and it's killing all the butternuts. We had 5 or 6 beautiful butternuts here that I wanted to save. When they cut out the canopy along the trail, they opened it up, and now these butternut are completely subject to butternut canker and have died. So what we need to do is look around the city and find some healthy butternut trees. And then I'll tell you how, once we find a healthy butternut tree, that we can honor it and maybe use it as a seed tree. So let's go up the trail to where the butternuts are, and right beside it is its cousin, black walnut. And we'll make a comparison between the two and how you can identify a butternut tree, and let us know some large healthy butternuts within the city of Orillia. So now we've come up the trail and we've come to this tree. This tree here is a butternut. Butternut, they call that the white walnut or butternut. A beautiful tree. I can remember as a boy, my father used to collect butternuts and roast them. Like he'd lay them out and dry them, and by Christmas time we'd roast them in the open fire. So that's a butternut tree. It has characteristic bark, 2 kinds of bark, one with deep furrows like this one, another sometimes it's smooth. However, what's happening with the butternut is this butternut canker, and you can see the canker has gotten in here. It's a fungus that's completely killing the tree. It usually starts here at the bottom, at the root crown and gets right into the trunk. So about 20 years ago, butternut canker started to come in here and kill all these butternut trees. We had 5 or 6 along the trail here that weren't in too bad of conditions back in 2011. However, once they opened up the canopy for the wires up there, the butternut canker has taken over. This tree is now dead. You can see it's marked with a pink blaze. I think the city is going to remove it because they're worried that it's going to fall over the trail. So we've lost the butternuts in this area, and unfortunately we now have a profusion growth of these invasive species like this Japanese knotweed, and we can see the garlic mustard at our feet and dog strangling vines. So opening up the light has really given a boost to these invasive species, and now we've lost our endangered trees along here. So you can see how this is a sad thing, this whole Cowan Street fiasco. Let's talk about butternut and how you tell them apart from its close cousin, the black walnut. Just down the path here we have a black walnut. So I did a sketch here of the butternut. And so the terminal bud is longer on the butternut than it is on a black walnut, and the leaf scars are straight across with a fringe of hair. So we've been able to find a butternut branch here, and there's the leaf scar. So let's just look at that, and you see how it's straight across below the bud. Later on we'll look at a black walnut. You'll see it has a notch in this area, and it doesn't have the fringe of hairs like that. So there's the leaf scar from last year. There's the bud for next year, and there's the fringe of hair across the top and a flat surface. You can see the terminal bud here is longer than the black walnut. We'll get a black walnut, make a comparison. So that's how you really tell a butternut from a black walnut. There are other things like the leaves. In the summertime, the leaves are more numerous on a butternut than on black walnut, and somewhat stickier. And they're a good way to tell, but the terminal bud is probably the best because you can do that both in the summer and the winter. So we'll go find a black walnut tree now, and we'll make a comparison with the two buds and the leaves. Now we're a little farther down the trail by a black walnut tree, very similar to the butternut. So we're going to look at a few of the differences. And as I have mentioned before in the sketches here, you can see the terminal bud is shorter on the black walnut than the butternut, and the leaf scars have a notch at the top and a monkey face leaf scar. Both have chambered pits, but what we'll do is we'll compare these two. We have taken a branch off of this tree, and before we took a branch off the butternut tree. So we'll lay these two drawings out like this, and we'll get a leaf scar. Let's use for the leaf scar, we'll use this one here. That's the butternut, and that's the black walnut. So you can see both the scars there and the shape of them. So the black walnut has a notch at the top, and here's the bud for next year's growth. It's all ready to grow next spring. This is the leaf that has dropped off from this year. So the black walnut has a notch. It's got the leaf scar here, Whereas the butternut doesn't. It's straight across at the top with a fringe of hairs. You can just see the fringe of hairs. So straight at the top and the fringe of hairs where we have the notch on the black walnut, and then coming down in sort of like a monkey face with an eye here and an eye here, the nose, mouth down here. Now we should look at the terminal buds of the two. So we'll go to the end and lay them beside each other. So there again, we'll make sure we've got the, you can see this is definitely the butternut with the straight across and the fringe of hairs. So the terminal bud of the butternut, see how much longer and narrower it is, and it's coming up. The black walnut here, again with the notch on the top, terminal bud's a little shorter of the two. You can look at the leaves too. Butternut doesn't have as many leaves on it as a black walnut, and the leaves tend to be fewer and smaller on butternut and quite sticky to the touch of the two. So that covers the difference between the black walnut and the butternut. But there are hybrids around that you have to be familiar with. That's what happened is the English walnut was brought over here from Europe, and it hybridized with our native butternut to produce one hybrid that isn't as common. But the Japanese walnut was brought over from Asia. It hybridized here to produce a hybrid, a strong, aggressive hybrid, and it's called Burhart's. This Japanese walnut and hybridized with our butternut tree to produce a nut that has a heart-shaped center of inside. So black walnuts are usually round. Here's a black walnut. It's round. There's once the pulp's removed, that's what it looks like. A butternut is narrower, more heavier, ridges, and very sharp point at the end. We don't have a butternut fruit to show you, but this is a black walnut fruit. The Burhart, the hybrid, if you cut that in half, it has that heart shape. So when you're looking for pure, healthy butternut trees that haven't been infected by the canker, make sure you don't get a hybrid. So what we really need to do at this point is to go out and look around the areas within the city of Orillia and see if we can find a purebred butternut tree that is still growing well and hasn't been affected by the butternut canker. At that time, we may be able to harvest some of the fruits and plant them and produce a strain that isn't subject to butternut canker.